Too bad you won't get to see me as Juliet in the arms of my Romeo. Maybe at your next school you won't have to deal with actors as talented as me and might get a part in a school play. Even if it's just something, small.
You didn't even...
Enjoy, Hobbit.
You're listening to Take 22, a media production podcast hosted by Matt Gray.
Welcome to Take 22. I am Matt Gray. And who am I? What am I? I'm some sort of a contemporary content creator, glorified videographer, independent filmmaker, podcast producer, apparently, among other things in the creative realm. And this is my little corner to talk about things that I'm experienced in to share with other creators. And in this episode of Take 22, I am later joined with Emma Halloran, who was in my independent feature, Madison Baker Was Here. She played Jocelyn, and she took the time to record with me months ago. And I'm just now getting around to getting that out. But first, before we get on to that, I wanted to just talk gear for a minute here. Now, the gear I used to shoot Madison Baker Was Here was great, lucky to have it, and, turned out fine for what it was. But shortly after production, some new gear started coming out that would have made life so much easier. Now, let me paint the picture. We're shooting an independent feature film, mostly exterior, mostly at night, on location around the town that we live in. My crew consisted of me and my then, I think he was almost 18 years old, son. Now, my oldest son was not particularly interested in filmmaking or thrilled to be doing it, but I did pay him for his services, and he's a good boy. So he did his best to help me out during almost practically every shoot during production. But the problem with that is if you're not someone who's really invested or interested or knowledgeable, it's hard to do the things, well, especially when I'm asking him to be basically assistant director, production assistant. He was the boom operator and running all the errands and our emergency driver if something happened. And so he had to carry gear all over the place and unload stuff and load stuff. He did a ton of work. But when it comes to the production aspect of it, he was mostly a boom operator. And it's hard to be a boom operator. If you have no interest in capturing sound, you're probably not going to do it great. So often the mic was not close enough to the actors. It was not following the action, or we're not kind of gain staging properly. And, that can be an issue. So I am overly paranoid about sound, particularly capturing clean audio. The last thing I want to do is get home, load everything up, and find out I have bad audio. So the way we approached Madison Baker Was Here is all of the actors were wearing Rode Wireless Go mics. And, I think I had 4 sets at the time. And then when we needed more wireless mics, I also have a bunch of the Rode Filmmaker Kit wireless microphones, which I have no complaints about those. Those are awesome. They're just a little bulky and hard to hide when you're trying to do something like a narrative feature where there's blocking and multiple people. So the Rode Wireless Go's are so small that they were perfect and lightweight, right? So these kids weren't running around with these huge packs on the backs of their pants or something. And the Wireless Go's were super small, but the problem with those is that they really need to be close. The transmitter and receiver really need to be close. They practically need a line of sight to maintain quality connection. So on our first shoot, when I listened to everything back, there were several dropouts. Our range was not what I thought. Even when I tested it, and this goes for like everything I do, I'll test things under the circumstances in which they'll be used, and then when it's time to hit record, none of the testing matters and everything falls apart, which is great practice for a director when you're out there in the field and everything falls apart and you got to learn how to adapt, which sometimes I did well and sometimes I completely failed at. But after this first shoot, when I discovered that these Rode Wireless Go's often had dropouts, I knew that we were going to need extra coverage of audio. So I did adapt in having some of the blocking be closer and knowing my limitations of where the mics need to, or where the transmitter and receiver need to be. I couldn't just, put the receivers off somewhere else. And what I would do, I really had to have the field recorder and the receivers close to the talent. And what I would do is these Rode Wireless Go's would obviously be on the actors, the transmitters would be, the receivers would be plugged in to a Zoom F8N. So all of those individual levels would have to be set and recording. And what's really nice about the Zoom F8N and that series is that it's dual card slots. So you can have a backup going while with your main card. So if there's a failure, you still have that second card capturing the audio. That's awesome. So love the Zoom F8N series, and that's what I was using to run the Rode Wireless Go's to. In addition, my son was booming a Rode NTG3 mic into a Zoom H6 on a boom pole using he was using my Sennheiser HD280 Pros for monitoring. And he wasn't exactly the type to, ride that gain knob or have the boom really in the most ideal location. Often it wasn't even up and over where you're pointing the mic down, and a boom operator has to hold the boomstick up and extend it and get it into the action. A lot of the times he's just kind of having the pole down with the mic pointed at them. So, I'm fighting a lot of, we're outside recording, so I'm fighting a lot of the street sounds and things going on behind the actors, and sometimes it's not very close, and if the gain's not high, it just becomes a mess. So in making Madison Baker Was Here with audio, those are my two main things, that NTG3 being boomed into an H6 and the Rode Wireless Go's recording into a Zoom F8N. And then in a lot of conditions, I had another recorder and I would have like a Zoom H1 set up somewhere or anything I could do to run something with an XY recording so that there was even another source to capture because I'm that paranoid. But in the edit, I would have to look at these individual tracks from the Rode Wireless Go's, and you could see there's little dropouts here and there, and then it's kind of navigating, okay, who was close enough to this actor during the dropout where maybe their line was picked up on their wireless Go, transmitter, or does it sound okay with the boom? In the files, the project files in Audition with all of this audio is insane because it's so much weaving and patchwork and trying to hide things with environment sounds and it was a mess. It was a nightmare to do in post. And it definitely took the longest in post-production was getting all of that audio as best as I could make it. I'm sure better audio engineers and editors could have done better work with my sound design, but I was trying to learn through the whole process. So sound-wise, that's what we used during Madison Baker. And for the camera, I used the Sony A7 III and a Sony a6400 as a B cam on some scenes. Mostly for the a7 III, I would have the 24mm G Master as the primary lens. And then on the a6400, if we were doing a sit-down kind of a setup, it was stationary, we weren't going to move around too much, I would use the 2-camera setup just to get more coverage because of how we had to shoot it. I would have the Sony 85mm f1.8 on the a6500, or I used to own an a6500. It was an a6400. So I'm using the 85 for, some real nice close-ups, things like that. And the 24mm G Master, wow. I was so thrilled with that lens. It had come out shortly before we started filming, and it was super hot. You couldn't get it. I had to rent it. I think I rented it for about a couple weeks of production, and then we ended up taking 2 weeks off, about 2 weeks off in the middle of production. And I was fortunate enough to find a copy that I could buy from, I think it was like China, where I bought it from and had to have it, paid extra to have it shipped and shipped fast to get to me. But super worth it. That 24mm G Master lens was beautiful. It's exactly what I wanted to use to shoot most of our stuff. So, you can't complain. Sony a7 III, an a6400, and some really nice glass. Those are huge advantages. Having a full-frame sensor like the a7 III has, it was certainly an improvement from just using an APS-C camera, and certainly a massive improvement from my older Panasonics that I owned before I went into Sony, like the GH4, GH5. I owned a couple of G7s, but micro four third sensors, so the low light was terrible. You had to add a lot of light, and we didn't have that really as an option because as a 2-man crew and shooting on location out in the town in the middle of the night in a lot of locations where there wasn't a lot of light, I really was leaning on that full frame sensor and boosting ISO and things like that. Now we would set up, little lights and things like that, but a lot of the time it just wasn't ideal to do that. And thankfully, as a freelance professional, I own a lot of different types of gear, microphones, field recorders, things like that. So I had the luxury of having this equipment, and I was able to have, the boom going and wireless microphones going. Shotgun mic was always on the cameras for that extra backup scratch audio situation. But the point is, shortly after all this, upgrades for everything came around, and it would have made my life a lot easier had I had this new equipment when we were shooting Madison Baker Was Here. It was right after we were done shooting, Zoom launched their F6, a 32-bit float field recorder, which would have been amazing to have. Well, it's smaller than the F8N, and while you can't record 32-bit float if you're doing wireless, it would have been awesome to have the F6 for the boom operation, because then we obviously wouldn't have to worry about gain staging, and the audio options off of the boom situation would have been much better. Additionally, a side thought, now this isn't a make or break kind of a deal, but after using the NTG3 for several years, the Rode NTG3 shotgun mic, which is a fantastic mic, however, it's really, really bass heavy. You get more low frequency than you probably really want. And I noticed that big time, especially with rumble from outside, things like that, and just voices. It's really becoming a mic I don't want to use anymore. And I realized how superior the Sennheiser MKH416 is when capturing dialogue. Like, I knew the mic existed. It's a legendary mic. But I thought, I just didn't quite understand the difference between like the neutral capture of the Sennheiser and the more bass-colored NTG3. And after shooting a feature film and editing that NTG3 audio, it was clear to me that next time I want to stay away from the NTG3 and go for something like a Sennheiser 416. But the real game changer with any of the audio that we captured would have been using that F6. No matter what microphone we used, 32-bit float would have saved a lot of trouble in the boom side of recording. When it comes to the wireless recording, Rode then came out with the Wireless Go version 2, and those would have been awesome because all of those little dropouts in the audio is negated in the Rode Wireless Go Mark IIs because they record internally on the transmitter, and then you can open up those files if you need them, and it shows you where there's markers on the waveform where there are dropouts. In those files, since they're recorded internally, there are no dropouts on the internal recording file, and you can have that as a backup. So if you do lose connection, it's always there on the transmitter. Those would have been huge for Madison Baker Was Here. But of course, didn't come out to about, I don't know, I guess a year later. And finally, the Sony a7 III is, to me, a legendary camera. It was a game changer when it came out in early 2018. A Sony full frame hybrid camera for less than $2,000. And that's what got me into full frame. It's what completely pulled me away from Panasonic. And I made a lot of projects, made some decent money with that a7 III. Can't complain about it. But the a7S III, or the FX3, they're the same cameras really. The a7S III with its incredible low light would have been such a game changer visually for us. It's better autofocus, obviously better low light, and for the uninitiated, the a7 III I think had a 24 megapixel sensor. The a7S III has a 12 megapixel sensor. Oh, but it's less megapixels. It can't be any good. But less megapixels, larger it's a larger area of capturing light, so that sensor can actually capture more light per megapixel than higher megapixel sensors. And this a7S III sensor, in my opinion, is just gorgeous. It brings in such beautiful images, and the camera itself is fantastic to work with. I absolutely love it. And it's got a dual native ISO where you can bump up to 12,800, have an amazingly clean image, and that would have saved us in so many situations. Because as great as the a7 III is, I never really wanted to go above like 6400 ISO. And then beyond that, you're negotiating with the noise that's coming through on the image. So, good Lord, if I would have had an a7S III, Rode Wireless Go Mark IIs, and a Zoom F6, my life in post-production would have been so much easier. My life during production would have been much easier. But those are kind of my thoughts gear-wise about what we shot with, what we used for production, versus what I have now and what's available now. And there are other great 32-bit float type field recorders for sound, like Zoom just came out with the F8N Pro, and it does 32-bit float. Tascam has a new 32-bit float Handycam type recorder. And then all of Sound Devices version 2 of their Mix Pre series are 32-bit float. And I'm telling all my filmmaker people out there, get a 32-bit float audio recorder, and that will help save you in production huge. And Zoom just came out with this very small F3 with 2 XLR inputs. It's tiny. You can strap it to your wrist. You could strap it to the boom pole. It'll go for a long time, record 32-bit float. You don't have to worry about gain. You don't even have to monitor the sound if you don't want to. These things are amazing. So just my opening thoughts there on gear before I got into too much about the interview and all of that. And as I said, Emma Halloran took some time out to talk with me about her experience in making the film. And her character is Jocelyn. Jocelyn is a bully that Madison Baker and her friends go to school with. She lives close by Madison, so we see her come to the house. and she's really in no way likable. Now, I've had some feedback from this specific character where people have said, Jocelyn's not necessary. We really don't need that. That's probably true, but two things. One, I really wanted to work with Emma because she's just an amazing person, and I love to see her talent come across on screen. And I knew in my heart that she could pull this off and make it funny and delightful and be an antagonist that we really don't have elsewhere for the character of Madison Baker. And Jocelyn provides Madison Baker with a bit of a character moment, a bit of an arc where she is one particular way with Jocelyn in the beginning and a completely different way in the end. And these are very short sequences, but I felt they were very important to tell the audience who Madison was at the start and who she's become after a night on the town with her friends. So with that said, the following is my discussion with Emma Halloran. Now I have Emma Halloran on the phone with me to discuss what she's been up to since she played the part of Jocelyn in Madison Baker Was Here. Emma, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be talking to you today.
And you are visiting home because you've been off to your first year of college. Can you share where you've been and what you've been doing?
Yes. So I am attending Xavier University, which is in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I have been there for the first semester. And I actually ended up getting back late November and taking my finals online. So I've been home for about a month now, and it's been really great to just relax. College has been a lot of fun. I've been doing a lot of theater, which has been great. I'm meeting a lot of new people, and I'm really starting to form my community there. So while it is nice to have this time at home, I do really miss everyone, and I can't wait to see them in the spring.
Well, it's so cool that you went on to do theater in college as well. I'm surprised that anybody wanted to continue acting after working on Madison Baker Was Here. So that's encouraging. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how we met because you were very much involved in your school spring musicals at St. John Notre Dame. And I was hired to capture those musicals and do behind the scenes features. And you were very instrumental in giving me a lot of good stuff from behind the scenes, but you were so much fun to watch on stage. You always stood out in my mind as just someone who would be really fun to work with. And I'm so glad you initially agreed to work on Madison Baker Was Here, which would have been in 2016, believe it or not.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, that's when the idea started and you agreed to be involved. But we, of course, didn't shoot until summer of 2019. But I'm so thankful that you stuck with it the whole time and were willing to come out and do this with us. And not only were you Jocelyn in the film, you helped us out quite a bit on several shoots, just being script supervisor and being moral support for us all. It was very helpful. And do you remember me asking you to be in the film?
I do. I remember because 2016, because that was during Shrek at St. John's.
Right.
And I was playing Donkey, which was like a big deal for me. I was so excited. It was one of my favorite roles, like just on the screen and being able to play it was great. But I remember me and Sydney Langle, who played Paige. I remember us being behind the scenes, doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of remember you kind of brought it up informally. I think it ended up being like after one of the last shows, you were like, oh, I think I might have something for you in this movie. And I got really excited. Oh yeah. Like, trying to play cool. Like, oh yeah, like I guess I could do that. But I was super excited. And then I think you DM'd me or you like, and it finally was like solidified. And you said like, we want you to be the bully, be this fun little supporting character. And I was so excited. Yes, of course I'm going to do it.
And you also named our bully.
Oh, yes.
And do you remember why you picked that name?
I don't know what it is about like J names, and not that all people who have J names, I mean, JC Shopper, obviously she's not a bully, but
Yes, she
there's
is.
something about real talk. No, JC, you are great. If you're hearing this, I do not think you're a bully. But there was something about, I don't know why I was drawn to like James. I think I was going between probably like Jessica and Jocelyn. And it probably was because I said Jessica, and then I thought of like 3 people I knew named Jessica, and I thought, okay, I don't know anyone named Jocelyn. Kind of like what it is, but it's like a harsh, like Jocelyn. I think just like phonetically, the way I said it, I guess I thought, that sounds like a name of like some like entitled like girl who thinks she's better than everyone. So yeah, it really wasn't too. I mean, it was like 3 years ago. I've definitely, when I picked the name, I believe I picked it closer to when the idea was conceived as opposed to like shooting the film.
Right.
So I think it was more just me thinking of stereotypical like bully names, I guess, and landing on Jocelyn.
Well, I thought you picked I thought you picked a great name. I had no hesitation using the name, and yeah, I reached out to you when I actually needed to start having the bully's name in the screenplay and filling that those lines in with the character name. And when I saw Jocelyn, I was like, that's perfect, excellent. So good job, Emma. Now you left St. John Notre Dame and went on to do theater at your high school. So you obviously love theater. Can you talk about the transition from going to like a middle school spring musical situation to high school theater? What were the differences?
So I think a big difference is that I attended St. Francis High School in Sacramento. It's all girls high school. And the big thing was that you could actually take theater classes, which you couldn't do that at St. John's. It just wasn't offered. But getting to take classes was a big deal for me just because it felt like I was always involved in something. And it wasn't necessarily a big production, but it was like writing a 10-minute play or contributing to a one act. In terms of performing, the amount of talent just shot up because you put all these people together that have been doing theater for as long as, or probably longer than I have, at companies, like Sacramento Theater Company and EDMT and things like, and Eldorado Musical Theater, if you're not familiar, but people that have been really dedicated to it their whole lives. And I got into theater around middle school, but I was definitely a sports kid growing up. And then I found theater kind of later in my childhood. Going into St. Francis and going to that first audition, which was for a musical called The Boyfriend, because St. Francis actually did their musicals in the fall instead of the spring.
Right.
Just like seeing all the people, and especially just being a freshman and being, the youngest one there, the least amount of people. It definitely really intimidating. And it put me into this mindset of, well, yeah, I can have fun. It's still fun. It's still theater, but I also need to decide, am I going to be willing to work harder at this? Am I going to be willing to improve? Because that's what all the people around me are doing.
Right.
But once you start getting involved and you're a part of a show and then the fun comes out, because I described that makes it sound so cutthroat, but it is still high school theater.
Right.
And especially during Tech Week, which for people who don't know, Tech Week is the week between rehearsals and productions being shown to audiences. So Tech Week is when like the actors kind of merge with the lights and the sounds and all the cues and things like that. That was a cool little thing to watch and see how so much of like the technical side and the performative side all blurb together. But I bring up Tech Week because that's when you really start to see the fun side of people, the jokey side of people, because it's literally just moving from cue to cue and just waiting. You say 2 lines, then they'll say hold, and then you stand on stage for 15 minutes and wait for them to set the lights and the cue and the sound cues if you're using like tracks and stuff like that. But that's sort of when I could see, oh, like these juniors and seniors, yes, they're very serious about theater and they do a great job and they practice, but they're also still people. They're still high school students dealing with annoying teachers and hard classes, and that really humanized the experience for me. And so when I became the junior, the senior, I wanted to be sure that, yes, like I wanted to be a role model in that I work hard, I focus during rehearsal, but I also still wanted to appear like I want the freshmen to feel like comfortable and not nervous around me, because I felt nervous around people that I shouldn't have felt nervous around just because I was afraid that like they were so serious.
Those are very great points, because when you're in an environment like the spring musicals at St. John, it's kind of a quote unquote voluntary situation, but kids are really funneled into that and prompted to go be a part of it in some way, even if they have no interest in theater whatsoever. So you're kind of surrounded by people who aren't really taking it serious. You go up to high school and you have people who are competing for roles and jobs, and they want to be there and they all want to be better. And yeah, it is a much bigger pool of talent and desire and determination. So it's tougher to compete, but I'm sure it absolutely elevated you in all aspects. And I bet Tech Week at a high school was much nicer than like Tech Hour that you had at St. John, where they tried to figure everything out like 10 minutes before the play starts.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh my gosh.
That was very stressful for me too. But you invited me to come see The Boyfriend, which was a wonderful play I brought my youngest son to, and I thought you did a really great job there, and I was super impressed by the quality of production at St. Francis, and knew at that moment, wow, the kids who want to be involved in this program are really getting a lift up in theater presentation and production. So good job with that.
Thank you. And just to quickly shout out, because that was my first production at the school, and JC Shopper was also, we were the ensemble of that show. And our show ended up getting nominated for Rita Moreno Award, which is like a regional award ceremony. And they actually, if you're aware of the Jimmy Awards, which is a big high school theater intensive in New York, where it's like there's each these regional award shows, and they get like the best actor and best actress. And both of them go to New York. Well, they did. I don't know what they're doing now because of COVID, but they go to New York and they do a bunch of workshops to like compete. And a lot of people get their Broadway starts because of it. But our show as a whole was nominated for Best Production for these awards. And we actually got to perform like a medley of numbers.
Wow.
And so that just really stood out. Like, I think that's why I got this air of like, oh, dang, high school theater's serious. Like, they're going to award shows. And there's the regional Ellie Awards, and our choreographer, who is now the director of theater at St. Francis, Kiera Anderson, actually won an Ellie Award for the best choreography for The Boyfriend.
Wow.
So I figured, since we brought it up, I'd shout him out.
That's really cool. I had no idea, and that makes so much sense, because that's what really stood out to me was the choreography of that production. There were so many people at different times on the stage, and it was a very high level of choreography, to put it very simply, and it impressed me. So that's great to hear that it was recognized even further.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's cool to think about, especially since like I was a freshman, and you're right, we did have a big ensemble for that show.
Yes, huge. Well, Emma, here's the problem. You happen to be probably the sweetest and nicest person I've ever met in my life. And we cast you to be the worst person possible in Madison Baker Was Here. So having you be a bully was quite a stretch. Can you talk about the challenges of portraying a bully on screen?
Yeah. And thank you for saying that I'm the sweetest person. My parents might not agree with you, but I'm glad you think so. So being a bully, and just it's a very kind of archetype role, you know. You're like not the antagonist, but you're definitely like an obstacle to the main character, which is Madison. So I think it's easy to sort of fall into like playing it in like just a very like mean, brash kind of way. But I think my biggest challenge was just working with the people like Madison, Madeline Lango, who played Madison, and JC, who played Cassie, Sophie and Izzy. Obviously their characters there, and Nina, respectively. But just working with them and having to kind of yell and be mean and insult Madeline. I remember, especially that first scene that I'm in when I walk up and I hand her the step, or I shove the step stool into her arms. I remember, like, I couldn't look anyone in the eye. I could not look JC in the eye because I knew I was going to break because it just was so ridiculous. Like, I definitely matured as an actor over the past 2 years after making this film. I remember struggling with sort of staying in the moment, especially since you said, like, I don't consider myself to be a bully. So it's very easy to kind of pull back in your own head and be like, this is so weird. Like, I'm saying this mean stuff. I'm calling her a hobbit. Like, why am I doing that?
Right.
And so I think doing that, like, took me out of the moment. And then I found that it was, like, a struggle not to break. So that was definitely a challenge. But the other thing, is at the very end, our quote unquote fight choreography, Madeline and me, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, there was a little part of me that thought, is he going to have her punch me in the face? Like, for real? Like, not really hard, but is he going to like touch my face? Am I going to have to move? And, but movie magic, got us around that. But that whole scene was just, a little bit like wonky for me personally, because I was like, well, how do I turn? How do I look?
Right.
And of course, the fake blood. That's one of the first things that comes to mind when thinking about this movie is the fake blood.
Wait, fake? What are you talking about? Fake? That was 100% real.
Oh no, yeah, that was real. Yes, I'm sorry. I don't want to ruin it for anyone.
I remember. Well, see, and here's the thing, Emma. When you have a good director, all of the questions that you had, the concerns that you had, would be addressed prior to shooting. But since you had me, we were kind of figuring it out on the fly as we went, and it was a very interesting shoot. But I feel like it relatively went quickly. And we just kind of worked out what needed to be done and shot the coverage for it. And I think our biggest, I can speak to what I thought the biggest problem was that we were just running out of blood capsules, and the timing of that blood actually coming out of your mouth when we cut back to Jocelyn.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's just, when you don't have a budget and you don't have somebody there who's managing practical effects and things like that, I think all things considered, we worked it out pretty well. And if I had my choice, I would have had Madison punch Jocelyn, and you just take the hit. But I figured, well, since you're somebody else's kid, I probably can't send you home with a bruise.
Yeah,
but
that would not bode well.
But I think it played well. When you watched the movie for the first time, did anything surprise you?
I think that since like you said, when I was shooting my scenes or I was helping the script supervise, there was no, it was just a dialogue. There was no sound. There was no music. And so when I watched the movie and there was music, I was all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, that was really cool. And there were moments when I think it was when they were at the school and you find out that Nina actually drank the entire bottle of vodka. And there's a shift in the music, and it sort of hits a more playful kind of sound, and it kind of helps guide the mood, because there are definitely moments that at first glance could be interpreted as a serious moment or a comedic moment, a comedic runner, especially with Nina, because then it's oh my gosh, she's drunk and she's never been drunk before, and these girls are outside by themselves. That could be a genuine kind of freak out moment.
Right.
But I think the music helps guide the audience into being Nina's the comedic relief. Like, it's, we shouldn't be worried about this. And so that part definitely was like kind of eye-opening for me, and I thought it was a really cool addition. And also I don't know what to call them, the drone shots, I guess. Just of the city, like just seeing Folsom in a movie, and just like when my parents and I were together, we're like, oh my gosh, like that's East Bidwell, like that's like just like picking out places like that's like top of the world or whatever they call it, like that's the bike trail, that's this, and it's just so cool because it's almost like it's immortalized. I believe that's the right word, immortalized.
Yeah.
Is that? Yeah. It's okay. Cool. It's just like immortalized, and you can go back to that and say like, wow, like I guess I don't permanently live anymore, but like this is where I grew up, and now I can see it in this movie. It's really cool.
Yeah, as you were with us only at one location, which was the Baker house, and only for the 2 scenes. So there's so much of the film. Well, most of the heart of the film takes place at night and away from that house. So you had no idea. You never saw any dailies. You didn't need to come in to do any ADR and see anything else, where other girls did have that opportunity. So I imagine you seeing the finished film for the first time, it probably, well, at least I hope, it probably actually felt like a film. Having seen the film, can you talk about the other girls that you know in the film and their characters and what you think maybe were the moments that stood out to you most?
Okay. So the first moment that really jumps out at me is the moment with Blair and Madison at the top of the hill looking down on all the lights, and it's sort of Blair confessing that, she only has 5 subscribers, and one is her grandma and one's a fake account she made, and Madison's just like, we know. And I thought that was, obviously each character has that moment, but that one just really stood out to me. I thought Sophie and Madeline, I keep wanting to say Madison.
Yeah.
Sophie and Madeline did a really good job. It felt really authentic. I was just like, especially, I thought Sophie Jenkins did, like, obviously Madeline did a great job, but Sophie Jenkins just really stood out to me. She didn't do too much. Like, she was just in that moment accepting that she's not the person that she tries to tell the world she is. And, Madison
Yes.
is really trying to tell her that, you don't need to be that person. You can be yourself, and like, you don't need everyone in the world to recognize you. And I thought that was like a cool message, especially in a world where, like, at the time Blair was always on her phone. I was like, oh, like that's kind of exaggerated. Like, she's playing, like it's for effect. But
Right.
Now in our world, especially with all this isolation, it's like, no, there are genuinely people who feel more comfortable hiding behind the video screen or just being on their phone all the time rather than like really engaging with people. So I thought that her character, like her, it's very important that you see that character. But that was a really cool moment.
And I'm so glad you were shining a light on that scene, because that's actually, don't tell anyone else, that's actually my favorite scene in the film.
Wow.
It's the one scene we shot that I got to 100% nail the way I saw it happening when I wrote it years prior. And that's from their dialogue and the camera movement and everything I was able to do in that sequence. We accomplished that night. And we almost didn't even go and shoot that location that night because we had already shot at a park earlier, and I thought they were just going to be way too exhausted to go do it, but we all decided let's go give it a shot, and they really knocked it out. For me, another little hero of that scene is the characters Cassie and Nina walking off screen. And then what I did was, after we were done shooting the scene, this is so behind the scenes, after we were done shooting, I went over and recorded audio from the actors, JC and Izzy, interacting with each other as they would off screen, as if Cassie was having trouble dealing with a drunk Nina trying to go to the bathroom. So that audio exists, and if you watch the scene, you can start to hear that conversation happen in the background. You can't quite make out what they're saying, but if you actually hear what's going on, it's hilarious. So while nobody else gets to enjoy that as much as I do, that is a little subtle part of that scene that I enjoy so much, because it kind of reminds you that these characters are still there, and their craziness is happening off screen while this rather intimate conversation is happening. And regarding the cinematography, Emma, if you'll notice watching this scene again, it starts off, the two shot of Blair and Madison is very uneven at the beginning, where Blair is taking up most of the screen and Madison's kind of pushed off to the right of it. But once they get to an understanding, and Blair has accepted that Madison really knows who she is, that image, or that framing begins to adjust to where they're both equal in the screen now. And then the close-ups get a little bit more intimate and tighter, until Madison says that cheesy line, and you go back to a super wide two shot of them, because it brings you out of that moment. So it's that type of filmmaking that I really enjoy, where you're using every element of the story to tell that story. And that was the one scene I actually got to do that in, because everything else was so run and gun.
That's cool. I'm gonna have to rewatch it, because I love, like, sometimes I can't pick it out, like, just watching something, but it's so interesting because, like, every choice, obviously, like, with live theater, I've learned that, like, every choice means something, but in film, it also means something too, and it's really, really cool.
Right. Oh, and I guess another note to that is the music that's used during that scene is an old classic. It's public domain, so I was able to use it.
Oh yeah, that's Claire de Lune, right?
Right. And Blair's original name in the original screenplay was Claire.
Claire, that's right.
But I just never changed. I just, I wanted, like I said, that scene plays out exactly the way I first envisioned it. So I kept the music and everything, because I wrote the scene to that music. So all of that is there.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's so funny that I brought it up. I did not know any of that. That's crazy.
Well, and I think, and you're not the first person to mention that scene as a standout. And I think it's a result of when you can get everything going right. Like, there's so much that happened in this film that just went so wrong and way off of what I had initially planned. But when you get to have time to prepare and things go the way they should, which is, which is a luxury when you're an indie filmmaker out in the middle of the night on the town with teenage girls trying to make a film, things aren't going to go the way you hope they go. But that was a moment where we all got lucky. And of course, working with Madeline and Sophie was just fantastic. They really brought everything and more that I could have hoped for those characters, and their interaction I just thought was beautiful.
Yes, I mean, from the screen, it looks great.
Well, thank you. Can you talk about seeing yourself in the finished film and the final interaction? Like, hey, spoiler alert. If anybody listening hasn't watched the film, stop listening, go watch the film. It's available on Amazon Prime right now. And don't listen to this part. But can you talk about seeing the final product of the final interaction between Jocelyn and Madison, and what you think that meant for Madison's character?
Well, obviously, it's clear that, like, Madison, all of her relationships, like, really take a big step forward through the course of that night. Obviously, we just broke down that scene with Blair, but with Cassie opening up about her family situation, and Madison sort of getting a glimpse into Nina's head almost. And even though I really did like how that, I love how that relationship is a little, like, unresolved. You get all the details from Cassie, you get all the details from Blair, but the Nina one is still like a mystery, and I really liked that choice because you could have, had another big reveal, but it's nice to just know that, we don't need to know all the details. It's important just to be there for someone when they need you to be there. And you don't have to know everything. And I thought that also was a really big moment for Madison. And cinematically, I thought that was a cool scene as well. But going back to Madison's finally made it back. She's done all the crazy things. And I think at this point, especially with sending that video to Ryan and the burp, and she sent it, and it's just like at this point, she's accepted that she's leaving and she can't really, she's not going to try and clean up her mess. And she definitely has a line where she says something about, or I can't remember exactly, but
doesn't have to deal with the consequences.
Yes. It's clear that Madison is a very, for lack of better words, calculating, methodical, does everything by the book. I mean, she says earlier in the movie that she likes to just read at night.
Right.
This whole night has completely flipped that on its head, and she's doing all of these rash and in the moment decisions. And so when she gets back, she's just a different person, and she has changed. And seeing Jocelyn there, I kind of imagine it as Jocelyn lassos her. It's just a lasso trying to pull her back. And she's just so over it. She's not having it. And that culminates in this need to go back to I thought it was interesting. She takes her friend's suggestion, she takes her sister's suggestion and uses violence, which is just so out of character. But it's sort of a way of showing that she's not going to fall back into the same pattern where she lets Jocelyn beat down on her and make her feel bad. And obviously there is that, she knows, I'm not going to be here. And at that point, she's still thinking, I'm leaving today. What, and I think it's sort of her finally doing the one thing that she'll never admit that she's thought about doing, but she totally has, She acts so shocked, and people are like, why don't you just punch her? And I believe that she's definitely thought about that. It's sort of her rejecting this position of being a victim and letting other people make you feel bad. And it's really even though it obviously has some comical merit to it, it's a pretty big deal to punch someone.
Well, Emma, having all of this experience in doing theater, what advice would you have for young actors who are just getting into that?
I would say if you're a young actor and you're really serious about doing theater, specifically live theater, I would just say you gotta just work. You have to put all your effort into it, and making the most of your role, regardless of what it is. Because personally, in high school, I was never a lead role until my fall semester of my junior year. And there were times, especially before, where, you'd go in and you audition, and then you get a call back. You get called back to a lead role, and you get really excited, and you're like, oh my gosh, I might get it. And then you don't. It can be really easy to sort of beat up on yourself and not. I know there's this stigma of that the ensemble is less important than the leads. And that can really be a struggle in high school because there are certain people who are just naturally gifted and they can sing well and dance well. And so they get the leads, and then they kind of perpetuate that stigma. But my advice is just make the most of what you're given and don't worry about those people, because the people watching you are the directors, are the choreographers, are the stage managers, are the tech crew. That's a big one too. Respect the tech crew. Treat them like people, because they are people and they are trying to help the show run well and play well. But overall, this sounds very collegiate, actually, the way I say it now. It's put all your effort into it. You can do it. But I've found that when I really get invested and I'm putting my effort into a role and I'm practicing the dancing and the singing, even if it's not a lead role, I found that I have more fun when I'm performing it, because I've learned to love it regardless of what it is. But if theater is really your passion and you like to do it, you don't even have to like love it and want to devote your life to it. But if you just like to do it, then you should want to put that effort in, you know? So
Right.
I found it to be fun to work, to analyze a scene, to learn a song, to do a dance, and just like finding the joy in it and not letting other people like make you feel bad or tear you down or whatever. That sounds so cheesy.
Oh no, and you never know. You never know if the you, you never know if the videographer in the back of the room is looking to cast for an independent
Yes.
film. So always put your best foot forward.
Exactly. It is the most, and you hear that, and that's really funny. Oh my gosh, that's so you bring that up, because you hear about so many actors getting discovered, and it's like the most random thing.
And on that same note, what would your advice be for young actors who are starting to get into indie filmmaking?
I'd have to say that, especially if you've done theater before and now you want to move more into film, I would say subtlety is a big difference between the two. That's, I think, something I struggled with. I was like watching my scenes. I didn't think they were bad, but I just thought, I don't need to make these giant motions so people know that I mean, which is definitely something you'd have to do in theater because you're on a stage and the audience is further away. But I think subtlety is key. And I think some of the best moments, definitely that Blair Madison scene we talked about earlier, had really great subtle moments, especially like with facial expressions. I think there was a moment where Sophie Jenkins is just like silent for like 10 seconds and you just see her, like, you just see her brain working and you just see her thinking, like, am I going to say this? Am I not? I don't want her to think of me any differently, and it's just really cool. It's a cool aspect of film, which is why I think I really enjoy watching movies and watching great actors, because they don't need to do a lot to get their point across. And so I would definitely offer that advice. Subtlety is key. On a more practical, less performative note, I would just say filming is 10% actually filming.
Exactly.
And 90% of standing and waiting and testing the light and moving the camera and changing the lenses. It's a lot of waiting. So you just have to be patient.
Absolutely. Well, and to address what you're saying about Jocelyn specifically, and these big movements and just her kind of being over the top, that was absolutely a directorial choice by myself. I was pushing you more and more into that. And it's because we have so little time with Jocelyn that I really wanted to drive home in the shortest amount of time as possible that she is incredibly off-putting, and I did not want the audience to like her at all. And I wanted the audience to really remember her so that as soon as they see her again, they know what's coming.
Like, Jocelyn.
Right. In a more perfect world, I would have had probably Jocelyn more involved in the plot, and for us to get a little bit more time with Jocelyn. But because of that short exposure to her as a character, I really was pushing you on the days to, just be a little more of a caricature of a bully than something subtle. So that's on me. No,
it's a bad thing. Like, I think it works because of the performance of everyone else. It's a good contrast.
Well, and I really loved editing those scenes and seeing your progression from different takes to go into this character that we finally have in the finished film. I really enjoy the moments. I hope your family enjoyed seeing you walk up and be this bully. But it's a testament. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, the first time I watched it, especially the second scene was fine, but the first scene, I saw myself and I literally just closed my eyes. I can't watch this.
Oh.
And then I finally watched my scene by myself. I was like, oh, That wasn't too bad, but they were cracking up. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, well, you were exactly as I asked you to be, and that is a testament to your ability, especially at that earlier of an age. I mean, this was at this point that was 2 years ago, over 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And you are not a bully, and you are not this mean person. And these girls, from school and were friendly with. So it was all quite a challenge, and to be on the spot with the ticking clock and everything, it's quite a lot to ask a teenage girl to come and perform that way. So I was certainly impressed and thankful that you were involved. But what is next for Emma? And what are you doing right now?
Well, right now, I'm relaxing, but so this before we went on break, Xavier University we had our auditions for our spring season of shows, and I was cast in a musical called Once. If you're familiar with the musical, I am playing Barushka, she's the mother of, the character's name is Girl. The show is very abstract. So Barushka is the mother of Girl, and she's actually Czech. So I will be learning a Czech dialect for the show.
Nice.
And another cool feature of this show is that the music is all like Irish kind of folk music, and all the actors actually play their own instruments. So my character is playing the accordion.
Really?
So I'm sitting next to my accordion in my room. I've been practicing my music. And there's guitars and mandolins, a cello, a violin.
Wow.
There's a couple of Cajun drums. It's a really cool show. And we open at the end of March. If you're I don't know if anyone is, but if you're in the Cincinnati, Ohio region, come to see Once at Xavier in 3 months. But yeah, I'm really excited. It's a really cool project. I do play piano. So I am like a musician in that sense, and it's helped me a lot with this accordion stuff. But it's going to be a really cool show, and I'm so excited to start working on it. We haven't actually started rehearsals yet, but our director sent us on break saying, come back with your instrumental music pretty much memorized. So when we get into the process, it will be easy to work just lines and singing, and the instrument is like second nature.
Right,
so that's the goal.
Talk about dedication to the art. That's so much to take on. You're the type of person that people like me need in their lives, because the talented or the untalented need you talented people to come and make the things we do better. So, Emma,
I would not call yourself untalented. You were very
well, thank you.
Maybe performance-wise, but the filming and the editing and the directing is very much talent.
Well, that's very generous of you to say, Emma. And again, I'm so thankful that not only did you agree to be part of this project, but you hung on with us for nearly 3 years of development and stuck with us during production. And you took the time to join me 2 years later to talk about your experience and catch me up on what you're doing now. And I really appreciate your time. And I'm so glad to see you moving forward in theater and the performing arts and enjoying yourself. And I just think that's incredibly inspiring for me, just to know that I didn't ruin your dreams. I didn't make you want to quit. And I'm glad that you had fun doing it.
I did. It was a lot of fun.
Where can people follow Emma's journey?
Yeah, you can catch me on Instagram at Emma with 2 A's, Halloran. So it looks like Emma Halloran. I'm starting to get a little more active. I took a break from social media, but now I'm obviously promoting all the shows that Xavier's doing, that I'm doing. But yeah, if you want to connect, that's where you'll find me.
All right, Emma, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk again.
All right, great talking to you.
Thanks for listening to Take 22.